Welcome back. I'm here with Clay Hebert. Clay, nailed your last name, dude.
You nailed it. How you doing, brother?
I've known Clay for about a decade. You
Yeah.
bought something from me. I didn't even know this called the status update solution. I forgot that I even sold that. We
I
will call
forgot what
that
it
now.
was. I searched your name and I was like, I looked way back on my email and I was like, oh my God, what is that?
We will call that the product that will not be named from now on. But I mean, Clay, look, dude, you've done it all from a lot of consultancy work and working with Accenture to mentoring under Seth Godin and then being one of his facilitators for the Alt MBA for a
Yeah.
while. I mean, you're profiled by Tim Ferriss and Tools of the Titans, by Deep Work and by Cal Newport. You've helped 2,000 projects raise over $100 million on crowdfunding. Like you know how to get people to go from zero to one real freaking fast. And I'm super excited to get into story and the brand and
Yeah.
how to stand out with you in a sea of sameness. But I have a question for you first,
Sure.
which is I want to know more about when you sold chocolate and chocolate bars
Uh,
back in, where was it,
I was,
Wisconsin?
yeah, Wisconsin when I was
We
younger.
never talked
It's
about
funny.
that.
No, we didn't. We just went, that was a great find. We went through a hot summer here in Austin and everyone was complaining that it was, it's 110. And I was like, playing pickleball all summer in 2 hours in 110-degree weather because I spent so many years zero through 18 in high school and then through college at Minnesota, freezing in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest. And
Right.
so I'm happy with hot weather. So I was about 7 or 8 years old one of these freezing nights. I bundled up in my sort of jacket and scarf and everything else. And it's funny because I think back and I think I'm not overprotective, but I don't think I would ever let my kid walk where I walk. It was like across like a 6-lane highway at night and blah blah
I
blah.
think about that even in Toronto. I'm like, yo, my parents said be home for dinner at
Yeah,
6:30, and
yeah,
I just be out with a hockey stick on the street.
yeah,
And
a
that
hundred percent.
sounds I mean, I'd let my kid do that, but it seems crazy. And if I let my kid do that and people recognized him, they'd be calling my house.
Sure, yeah. I don't. I mean, I think my mom knew where I was, but these particular sessions of selling these candy bars were after dinner. So it was like, come home from school, do the paper out, have dinner with the family, and then I would walk. It wasn't super far; it was maybe a mile, but it was
Right.
across a 6-lane highway of cars going pretty fast. And I was a kid, and obviously I was like lugging whatever candy bars I was trying to sell. So I was like, imagine like the kid from the Christmas Story, the movie A Christmas Story, where he's so
Right.
bundled up he can barely move, also carrying a bunch of boxes of overpriced chocolate,
And it was
dragging it across the
it was
highway.
for some charity it was for some like
Well, it's
school
for like your
program or
school
charity or something.
fundraiser. Yeah, you get points
Yeah.
for
Okay.
your school fundraiser or whatever.
Okay.
So the first few nights I did it, freezing my toes off, and like, hey, do you want to buy a candy? And the candy bars were $1. And obviously, they're not buying the candy bar because they're about to walk into a grocery store where there's a much better selection for a much better price. So it took me a couple days, and I figured that out. And then what I noticed is the same people always bought. If I happened to catch them on a Tuesday and then they were there on a Friday, they would always buy. So then I realized it's not about the candy bar. It's about the person and a kid bundled up and freezing his toes off because we had to stand outside because they wouldn't let us stand inside.
Right.
And so I did my first and hopefully last kind of slightly unethical marketing strategy, which is I brought my older brother's clothes in a grocery bag. And when about 6 of the people had bought the candy bars on the way in, I ran around the corner behind a dumpster, changed my hat, changed my boot,
Yeah.
and I'm wrapped so that you can barely see my eyes. And those same people bought on the way out, and then they didn't. Again, they bought because they're the kind of person who gives $1 to a little kid whose freezing took us off.
Right.
What I realized years later, and Seth Godin gave some brilliant, as he does, the tightest, most
Yeah. Of
efficient way
course.
to say certain things.
In
He said,
7 words.
5 words,
Totally
7 words.
amazing.
He's a magician, and he's like, people like us do things like this. And he said that, I don't know, 40 years after I experienced it, and I really understood what he meant because I wasn't selling calories, I wasn't selling macros, I wasn't selling chocolate. I was just a kid who was freezing, and it's almost pity, right? They are charity, and it's literally what it was. But people like us do things like this is maybe the most powerful phrase in marketing, and you've used the the understanding of that through a lot of the stuff that you built. So that's what I like to think when people are thinking about marketing, whether it's a product, service, or themselves. Don't start with the features and benefits. Start with the people like us. So one example I use sometimes is when people are sort of not getting this and they're leaning into kind of features and benefits and stuff. I said, John, if you and I had, it's October 4th, and if somebody had a gun to our head and said, by Halloween and by the end of the month, you guys have to start $1 million sock company. Well, what I would say is, John, let's start a CrossFit sock company, because if it's a CrossFit sock, now our marketing plan writes itself. CrossFit blogs, CrossFit influencers, CrossFit podcasts, CrossFit everything. If we just say, oh, it's a good athletic sock and we're going to try to reach everybody, good luck, choosing a niche and trying to do that. So yeah, that was freezing my butt off for selling chocolate bars was the first time I realized that.
Well, I'm not going to start a sock company because I know 2 people who have done that and failed. But because entrepreneur socks were a big thing for about 3 months at one point.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of samples from mutual friends of ours. One of them is Dan Dembski with Unbound Burrito, right? And then he went and started Unbound, and it's a phenomenal company. And I
love Unbound. I love it. I made the mistake of washing it wrong the first time, and then I didn't do that ever again. And then I learned how to not wash them.
My wife told me the perfect marketing for them. And she's like, John, I've never seen you do your own laundry ever. But Unbound, because you don't want me to put it in the dryer and you don't trust me to treat it well, you do your own laundry. Like, that's how much you love that clothing. You do your own laundry.
That is a great testimonial.
That's a great testimonial. So
we did his perfect intro, and I use him in most of the speeches with perfect intro.
Oh, do you?
We help people travel lighter. So lighter has 2 meanings. Lighter as in weight in your suitcase is lighter because you have less things, but also you're mentally lighter because before you pack, you're like, I got black short, brown short, gray short, black long, you got 6 shirts that you can match with any outfit. And so mentally for me, I don't really get stressed too much, but I travel a lot. And one thing I'm not good at is being fully packed and zipped up the day before. So I love Unbound because like at the end, I'm like trying to think about what to do. They're comfortable. I know they work, and their neutral colors now match. So it does help me travel.
But lighter. I love that. We help people travel lighter. So again, it's, yeah, sure, the clothing's good. Yeah, we could talk about the material. We could talk about merino wool. But what you just did there with him, I love it if you can deconstruct that a little bit. Like, what was the process that you worked with? Because I think that those little lines are very important. Yes, they work well on a website, but also when people ask you what you do. You and I were just at this big business event, right? Mastermind Talks together in Ojai, California about 2 weeks ago. And everybody asked me what I did, and I have no clue how to describe what I do, and I suck at it. But this is your mastery. And I'd love for you to walk through, like, deconstruct that using maybe Dembski, using Unbound as an example of we help people travel lighter. How'd you get to that?
Well, the first way I got to it is I sucked at it too, and I happened to suck at it. And I was at a conference put on by my friend Jim Quick. I didn't know him at the time, but a friend said, you'd love this conference. I used to live in San Diego, and I loved it. I was in New York at the time, and so I was like, twist my arm to go back to San Diego. Conference was, the first speaker was amazing. After the first speaker, he said, why don't you turn and meet the person next to you? Like they do at almost every conference ever, right? Sure. And so I turned and
give everybody around you a hug. I don't know what I feel good about that.
Thankfully, it was just an intro. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's like, so what do you do? And I never thought about that question too much before that day. And that day, maybe I didn't have my cup of coffee in the morning or whatever. Just rambled on and on about how much I love the Green Bay Packers and my favorite flavors of ice cream. It was just this long. And I finally realized, I'm like, why am I rambling? So to stop myself, I'm like, what's your name? What do you do? And he's like, oh, my name's Matt, and I run a little software company. Like, he was just cool. He was just not too many words, and he was just cool. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What's it called? Maybe I've heard of it. And he's like, it's called Automatic. And in that moment, I was like, oh, my God, this is Automatic. It's WordPress. I'm talking to Matt Mullenweg, and I knew who Matt Mullenweg was. And
cool as shit, right? Like,
he's just a cool dude. So and also he's like he's not like Mr. Look at Me online. Sometimes his avatar is like a pink circle or a pink square. He's like, he's not Mr. Look at Me on social media. So I knew kind of what he looked like, but I didn't recognize him in the moment that day. His hair was wet. Fortunately for me, this picture has helped my career a lot. Fortunately for me, the exact moment that I'm shaking his hand, my jaw is literally on the floor. I'm like, realizing that I'm
Right.
introducing myself to Matt Mullenweg, the event photographer snapped the perfect picture from the other side,
Amazing.
and I got that exact jaw-dropping moment. So
It's funny.
that's how it started. Was like I
It's like, oh, you're the
completely,
guy who fundamentally changed the internet forever. Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you
good to
power
meet you. Yeah, that's cool.
24% of the internet, and I've
Yeah,
built 9 client websites with your song. Oh, by the way, yeah. So
yeah,
I
right.
completely blew it. Skipped the next session. Walk around the thing like, you remember the old Chris Farley SNL skits where he meets the famous person and says the wrong thing, and he's like, "Oh, it's so stupid." Like that's how I felt for like a day. Then I wasn't like, "Oh, this is going to be a speech." I was just like, I want to fix it for myself. I never want to meet my hero and introduce myself that poorly ever again. So I worked on. I'm like, why do we never get taught this or what? And then I found the elevator pitch. I'm like, the elevator pitch is stupid. It's selfish. It's about you, and nobody wants to be pitched, especially in an elevator. And so I kind of developed a better framework for it. And then I taught that framework at a friend of mine asked me to speak to some of the startups in an accelerator in WeWork in New York. And 4 of them replied and it was like, my investor just re-upped. Like
Oh wow.
my partner finally understands what we do. So that was like a little flicker that like, hey, there might be something about teaching this to other people. And then I refined it and kept kind of dipping the candle in the wax. So
Do you think if I use this, my parents will finally understand what I do for a living? Because they still
I
don't.
hope so. I actually have a thought on this. I think it's this weird thing that people are proud of that our parents don't understand what we do. And it's a lot of people do it. And I'll be fair, I don't know that my parents understand what I do, but I think
Yeah.
it's sort of like bad handwriting. It's like people are proud of bad handwriting. They're like, oh, I type me the note because, or I'll type it because my handwriting is terrible. I'm like,
Well, you
it's
know
an
where it
odd
hit
thing.
me? It was the
What's that?
funniest thing. So I signed a book deal. So you know me well. I've
Yeah. Yeah.
self-published everything that I've done up until now. But I
Right.
signed a book deal for this Obvious Choice book that
Yep.
with HarperCollins, and so I told I told our family when I signed it way before I announced it to everybody else. And my mother-in-law, my mother-in-law was like, "Oh my God, we have an author in the family. Oh, how wonderful!" I'm like, "Yo, this is going to be my 12th book. I've literally
That's
sold
so funny.
I've sold hundreds of thousands of books. I have made tens of
Yeah.
millions of dollars by selling books or things related to my books. But
Right.
now
Now you're an author. Yeah.
now I'm an author, right?
Yeah.
And it's just it made me laugh so hard. I was like, all right, now I'm an author. That's cool.
Yeah. That's so funny. And it's funny because like the I'm an author, I'm a vice president, like those are the ways, look, if you're on the plane and you're having a terrible day and you don't want to talk to the person next to you,
Sure.
I'll do you one better. Just say you're from the IRS, and
Yeah.
they'll leave you alone. I promise. If you want to end the conversation, there's a million ways to do that. But most people don't necessarily want to end the conversation. And then they say, oh, I work in marketing. You've told me almost nothing. And I group you now mentally with about 2 million other people that work in marketing. What does that even mean? Versus like, you know, we help people travel lighter. Oh,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Well, you're on a plane. You got a suitcase up there. Tell me about your packing. You can have these conversations. It's not just about the intro and the clever line. It's a full thing to basically create better conversations, which create better human connection, which can lead to everything, right? You and I are on this podcast right now because on the summit right now because we met. At one point we met and we had a good enough intro to meet again and meet again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole thing. We're all here. We all do what we do because we met somebody and it led somewhere. So why wouldn't we, you talk a lot about fitness and nutrition and everything. Why wouldn't we improve that? Just like our health. Why this thing happens 3 times a day, 1,000 times a year. Why do we never practice it? It's like tripping
Yeah.
on your sidewalk every single day. And
So
so
how did you work backwards then?
the
You're
first,
welcome to use another
yeah,
example, or the
yeah,
Unbound
yeah.
example. But how did you work backwards with them from that?
No, the unbound one is perfect, which is first of all, it's like we talked about, like moving off of the product or service, right? We make 100% merino, like
Yeah.
that's like what if I can read it on the label, I don't need you to tell me about it. Tell me how it helps people. So with the typical intro, we make it about us. We try to make it complete because our 8th grade English teacher told us to make everything complete, and we try to make it accurate because we want to be truthful. So those things aren't bad in a vacuum, but it doesn't create an interesting conversation. A better way to do it is don't make it about you, make it about who you help. So that's we help, all right? Those 2 words. And then don't make it complete, make it interesting, and then don't make it accurate, make it confident. So imagine whoever your favorite movie person is, whether it's George Clooney or Julia Roberts, Jennifer Lawrence, whoever you look up to. Think of how they deliver a line in a movie. You know what? George Clooney doesn't deliver that line because he was just born, came out of the womb, cool ass George Clooney. He
He
delivers
might
that
have.
line. He probably did, but he delivers that line
Yeah.
well. I mean, he certainly looks the part, but the best screenwriters in the world wrote that line specifically for
Yes.
him, and then he practiced it 1,000 times.
Right.
What we don't realize is, even though none of us were born to be born George Clooney, we can do that too. We can know that when you go to a dinner or a cocktail party or getting on an airplane or anywhere, guess what? It's going to happen 3 times a day for the rest of your life. We know people are going to ask you, so what do you do? So why don't we write it like a screenwriter and practice it like George Clooney so that we look like George Clooney when we answer it? It's relatively simple, but make it about them. Who do you help? I mean, think of the people that you help and all the people that you've helped. And then the key thing is, once you have your intro, you got to be willing for it to not be complete. Like, we help people travel lighter. That doesn't tell me exactly what they do. What do you mean, or how do you do that? And then the best way to do it is what I call the case story, which is, we all love stories. Tell me the story of somebody you helped. Then you're like, oh, well, so there was this guy named Clay, and like he travels a lot for speaking and whatnot, but he hates packing. Like, he's a pretty organized guy. He makes really good spreadsheets, but for whatever reason, he hates packing, but yet he procrastinates it and does it at the last minute with the Uber in the driveway, which is just spikes his cortisol, and it's just stressful. Once we got him some Unbound, he knows black, white, green, brown, those go with anything, short sleeve, long sleeve. So he just pulls 4 hangers off the thing, and now Clay doesn't stress about work and blah, blah, blah. So how does it help the person in your life? How does it help the customer? I know with your work, you've got literally probably thousands or millions of those stories of people you've helped. And so that's a more interesting way, because what happens is when people hear that, then they see either themselves, hey, I'm stressed with packing too, or maybe they don't have a problem with packing, but their brother does or their cousin does or whatever. And you're not even doing a sale or an affiliate or a referral. You're just talking about a solution, and somebody's like, I know somebody with that problem that wants that
Yeah.
solution.
And when you talk about something like packing, to me, the reason that I love the clothing is not even packing. It's mental capacity.
But
It's
yeah, that's the travel
cognitive.
lighter part.
It's
Sure.
cognitive ease. It's travel lighter, and even when I'm not traveling,
Yeah.
I just don't want to like I think about what's my desired outcome when I wear clothing.
Yeah.
I want to feel like I look good and I want to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so lighter still
Yeah.
helps achieve that,
Yeah,
which
and I mean,
I think is really
2
great.
guys that built a fairly successful Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs. Like, Zuckerberg wears this one, I don't know what it is, $220 hoodie
Yeah, it's
or
a super
t-shirt or whatever.
expensive one, isn't it? Jobs
Yeah,
was
but it's
not.
like he probably only needs 20 of them or whatever, and he's got the cash. And same with Steve Jobs. Like, once he found
Yeah.
that Isaac Mirazi black mock turtleneck, he was like, give me 200 of these so that when I wake up in the morning, I can worry about building the iPhone and not what I'm going to wear. And it does that red checkered shirt make me look like a lumberjack, right? Steve
Yeah.
Jobs never stood staring at his closet wondering what to wear after a certain point.
Yeah, I think we downplay the amount of little decisions that we need to
Yeah.
make every single day.
Yeah.
I did a calculation once that there are 24 different types of eggs you can buy from the grocery store.
Wow.
When you actually put it all together, there's white, brown, small, medium, large, free range, organic, omega-3. I might be missing 1 or 2 of them, but when you actually put together all of the combinations, there's 24 different types
Yeah.
of eggs.
That's wild.
We've got, if you live in the States, it's like you've got 2 choices of who to choose for president and 24 choices of eggs. What are we doing, man?
Can we please flip it around the other way? I would like 24 different choices for president. Yeah, I'd be fine with
we
one
flip
choice of
that
eggs if
around?
we could get more choices.
I would be fine with 1 choice of eggs.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something that
Yeah.
you said before. I wrote down a note because I wanted to put a pin in it. Where, yes, it was people like us do things like this, and even people like us do things like this here. You can
Right.
extend upon that, and
Yeah.
that's been a big part. I mean, from Seth Godin gave language to it as well. For me, this idea of working backwards from your thing, working backwards from your people. There's an entire section in the book. It's a chapter called "Let Your Geek Flag Fly,"
Nice.
and it's that idea. I tell the story of somebody that we work with, where CrossFit again. She had a CrossFit. She had 3 CrossFit boxes with her partner in
Okay.
Poughkeepsie, New York. And I looked it
Sure.
up, and that's a real place. And,
Yeah. I know right where it is. Yeah.
and they had 3 boxes, and they were named like best of whatever, super, super popular. And then they went online. And they thought, oh, this is going to be easy. We're going to build an online thing. We've got all these customers. And all of a sudden now, when they went online, they were just another person talking about fitness stuff online. How are they different? And so she was in a mentorship, and she was on a call with me. And at that time, I asked her, I said, what is it that you're almost embarrassingly excited about and interested in that has nothing to do with fitness? And she goes, oh my God, cometology and astrology.
Wow.
I was like, okay, cool. So we saw this thing last night. We were living in Mexico at the time, right? It was like, we saw this thing at light flying through the sky, and here's what it looked like. And she's like, oh my God, did you see it? I'm like, I don't know if we saw the green comet, here's what it looked like, right? And she goes, oh, no. That was just the launch from the Palo Alto, like whatever, something that happened last week. Was it flying north? I'm like, yeah. She goes, yeah, that was the launch that looked like this. I was like, okay, did you see what happened there? You went from saying, I hate content and I don't know how to stand out on the internet, to telling me the exact launch of the space shuttle. I was like, so here's what we're going to do. You are going to form the Space Nerd Athleticism and Sexification Agency, SNASA.
I like it.
And in order to find your snastronauts,
Yes.
now you're going to work backwards, because it actually becomes very clear. And this is exactly what you said, right? It becomes so clear once you have that, how to work backwards. Like, how do you find your people? Well, like, you got to find space nerds. Okay, so I'm not going to call a medicine ball slam. I'm going to call it a Big Bang.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in space nerd groups, and I'm going to ask them for help naming my exercises.
For sure. Drop the Death Star. Like all the different things. Yeah.
There's so many. Many.
Yeah.
Can you think of any examples that you've seen that are just brilliant, where somebody, like, either it's their geek flag, like something different, or it's just, hey, this is how we found this. This is how we identified our people, and then this is how we walked backwards from that.
Yeah, it's 100% all about walking backwards. I like your analogy on that. What I often, like, if I work with clients or brands, one thing I'll do is, depending on the size of the room and if everyone's there, sometimes I'll bring in my duffel bag a bottle of champagne. And I don't even really drink champagne, once in a while, maybe at New Year's, but not my go-to. But I make them define what I call their champagne moment, because a champagne moment is very specific. And you may have heard Jason Gaynor talk about this. A champagne moment is, you tell me exactly what will have happened a year from now that will cause you and I to pop champagne. And the analogy is, when a team, say the Houston Astros, wins the World Series, unless it's a walk-off home run, if you think about it, there's always a ball hitting a glove. So there's leather on leather, and there's like a crack of the glove. It might be the outfielder, finalizing the ball. Sometimes the guy gets thrown out at first, but usually it's a third out in usually the 9th inning.
Could be a strikeout, could be a
but even if it's a strikeout, the ball hits the catcher's glove, right? Unless it's a walk-off home run, which is epic. Maybe then somebody in the stands catches it.
Joe
So
Carter,
that ball hitting,
touch 'em all, Joe.
There you go.
Jays go.
Exactly. And
so clinging on to that, as a Toronto sports fan, we get used to perennially disappointing teams. So we got to cling on to the early 1990s.
That's the one. He pumped his fist, right?
He did.
Yeah. So the champagne moment is specific because the ball hits the glove, the game is over. Now, if the guy drops it and the runner advances, he might score, win that game, and then they go on, and maybe the other team wins the World Series. But once that ball is secured in the glove, third out, World Series, then grown men who are multimillionaires put on ski goggles and spray perfectly good, very expensive, last time they used Jay-Z's champagne, perfectly good, very expensive champagne all over each other. It's a very specific ritual that happens every year. the specificity of that is what I use to get people to define what's your champagne moment. And if they, if the C-suite is bickering and the CMO wants different things and whatever, like I'll reach the bottle of champagne and put it on the table and say, we're not leaving this room until we figured, is it revenue hitting a certain, like you tell
Right.
me, and I can
What is
guide
it?
them or provide feedback. But to your point of working backwards, can we all agree that if that happens, we're going to pop this champagne and we don't have to spray it all over each other, we can drink it? But like defining that super specifically and working backwards, then we can build a plan for anything. The problem is, to your point, a lot of people, they want, whether it's marketing or whatever, and they try to drive forward, but they've got black paint all over their windshield, or maybe they can see out the windshield. They just haven't defined a destination. It's like the old quote: if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
Right.
So yeah, I like the working backwards thing.
I think a lot. I'm thinking a lot these days about Goodhart's law. You ever heard that one?
I don't know that one.
He said, this is Charles Goodhart,
Okay.
and Goodhart's law is when the measure becomes the goal, it ceases to be a good measure.
Nice.
And I'm thinking about this a lot with just misaligned metrics that are all
Sure.
over the place.
Sure.
You think about the goals of like a social media company, for example, and the insights that they show you and the metrics that they show you, and how their goals are simply different than your goals. Like, unless your goal is to
100%.
become famous on their platform, which for some people it is. For
Sure.
most people listening to this, because we're not trying to be influencers, we might be trying or thinking that we should be leveraging, call it new media, social media, in order to build a business. But like using this thing to build a business is fundamentally different than trying to get famous on this platform. And when you look at the metrics they give you, they're often very superficial engagement metrics. And it's not that they're bad
They're a
metrics.
trailing metric. They're like,
trailing metric.
you become a Kardashian and you get on TV and then you get a bunch of followers. You don't get like for most people, they're famous in other areas.
Yes.
And that's why, a Kardashian can post inane stuff about, and I give them credit, but like they can post inane stuff about their toenail polish or whatever it is. And then other women with 172 followers trying to want to be there, it's like they drive the car in reverse. They see the toenail polish pick and they go, oh, I should do the same thing. And that will make me that thing. It's like, no, they had a TV show for years and then they became famous online. That's what I mean. It's a trailing metric of fame, and chasing it is almost, for someone who believes in the power of personal brand strongly, I believe almost as strongly that, the number of followers metric is one of the most useless things. Tell me how many diehards you have. I always say, like, stop counting followers, start counting, think of all our friends at MMT, people that would let you crash on their couch, people that would bail you out of jail. Like, those are the numbers we should be keeping.
So I want to talk to you about metrics, but you're right. And I was speaking with Cyrus, who is the co-founder of Goalcast.
Okay.
So to use the most extreme example, right? We spent a lot of time together. He's a great dude, and they built a great company. One of the biggest viral video companies out there.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure you've seen a Goalcast video. I certainly
Definitely
have seen a lot of them. And one of the things he told me straight up is follower counts are irrelevant. Even in terms of views, follower count is irrelevant.
Sure.
It's engagement. How engaging is your thing? But to your point, though, Clay, I mean, I agree with you, man. There's this wonky misconception out there that you've got to do dope shit online in order to enable you to do dope shit in real life, and it is the opposite.
It's the
You
opposite.
got to do dope shit in real life, and then you can maybe amplify that by talking about it in a dope way online. But the dope shit in real life happens first.
Exactly. No, it's the other way around. My friend, I was just in Jackson Hole for a couple of days with my good friend Colin O'Brady.
I was just there.
Really?
I was there like a month ago. We did a bunch of hiking in the Tetons and everything.
That's awesome. I was there like 2 weeks ago. My great friend Colin O'Brady lives there. First man to cross Antarctica solo, just pulling a sled. He was the fastest to do the highest peak in all 50 states. He did it in like 22 days. So like multiple
Sounds like the
points.
type of person that would live in Jackson Hole. They're all like the craziest adventurers all live out there.
Yeah. I think it's because they go do great. Well, you can train for the crazy adventures there, but then, when he gets on a plane and he goes and breaks a world record somewhere, it's super interesting. So then when he comes back, he likes the quiet slowness of the Jackson Hole. But anyways, he did, and, he's been on Joe Rogan and a cover of Outside Magazine and all these interesting things. He's just a super dope dude. But the Instagram followers came because he did all that, to your point, dope shit in real life. And then, of course, people want to hear, Jesse Itzler and all this stuff. And 29029 is one of his businesses. All that comes after doing the amazing stuff. He didn't wake up one day and said, how do I get a bunch of followers on social media? He went and crossed Antarctica, and then people want to talk to you, and then they find you online.
I wouldn't want to cross Antarctica. So what metrics then? So how do we, because this is actually something, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the few gaping holes left in the book that I don't know how to close.
Sure, let's do it. Let's finish the book right here.
Try to help me close this.
All right, we'll do it.
Because I'd love to give some actionable advice.
Sure.
I make this argument against the insights, the superficial engagement metrics, right? And I make that argument, and I think they make that argument well. I talk about the difference between entertaining around an idea and becoming an entertainer versus building a business, and how neither is better or worse, but they're fundamentally different things with different rules of engagement, time horizons, right, odds of success. But what I have not been able to figure out is how to, I can figure it out for like an individual, like I know what it is for me, but I haven't been able to figure out how to really talk about, okay, well, here's how you figure out what metrics are right for you. If you do decide to use, call it Instagram, here's how you figure out how to actually identify whether this is working for you. I mean, is it booked business, or is it people who will pick up the phone?
It's a great question.
I think that?
Yeah, the way I think about this stuff, and I don't think you and I have talked too much about Perfect Calendar, but I teach the Perfect Tincture on the Perfect Brand. The Perfect Calendar is simply, it's sort of how I boil down personal development. So there's the world of sort of spiritual woo-woo, Burning Man, universe, all this stuff over here, right? And then there's the world over here of like David Allen and Tiago Forte, who's a good friend, and productivity and everything else. And where those, and then there's the, why, purpose, happiness stuff, right? So all those things where they intersect that we all have is a calendar. And I think, I'm not an expert in anxiety and depression or any of that stuff, but I really think the happiest and most successful people look at their calendar, and sure, there's some stuff on there we don't want to do. We got to take the car to go get an oil change because the AI can't do that yet, or whatever.
There's always going to be dumb life shit.
Yeah. There's a few dumb life shit, but my idea is like
you read your calendar. Kid a comic last night, a Star Wars comic last night, and it scared him, and so he had nightmares and was up 8 times overnight.
There you go.
Like dumb life stuff, like it happens.
Yeah,
not a perfect calendar moment.
No, not a perfect calendar. But what the exercise does, and I can send this to your folks or whatever, wipe your calendar clean. Nobody ever gets, as soon as you have a calendar, freshman year of college or whatever, then stuff gets on your calendar and you never get a chance to say, just F it, wipe it clean completely. And then put back on there the things you love to do, and then put on there the things that you have to do, like, taking care of your kid and taking them to soccer practice, and then put on the work stuff. And what happens is there's always enough time. I've never had anyone do this exercise and they put on like 800 hours of work per week, because you know what you don't put on? Mindlessly scrolling Instagram or Twitter for how many hours or whatever. Like, nobody's like, that's part of what I want to do. And what happens is magically all this time opens up. Oh, I want to start going to the gym, but I'm so busy. All right, let's wipe your calendar. Let's put the gym on first, because I'm pretty sure your family would be happy if you go to the gym 3 times a week. Boom, boom, boom.
And I found that when you schedule fitness first, everything else seems to fall in place neatly around it as well.
Enough
Not saying that it is the most important thing necessarily for everybody, but I have found that when you actually schedule it in first, everything else fits nicely.
That's the whole point of this exercise is there's actually plenty of time to do everything you want to do and everything you need to do. Put the need on first and put the want on. But if there's something that you dread putting back on there, guess what? Now you know what you need to hire for, right? There's things people hate, and then they're like, I wonder who I should hire. I wonder what I should outsource. And it's like, outsource the stuff you hate. And so that's kind of how I think. So the metrics, to me, I would not use any metric of success with social media. If you're like, I'm trying to launch a candle business, I would look at like number of customers and number of candles sold and maybe revenue and profit. Like, is it a sustainable business? But social media metrics, you made a good point earlier. These platforms care about you less than like big banks care about you. They really don't care about you. They're going to wake up and they're going to
That is
tweak
a
and
fantastic analogy. You know how much big banks care about you? They don't give a shit.
yeah, Instagram is
Social media
prettier than US
networks.
Bank, but it cares about you even less because there's more of you using it than any one bank. And they'll wake up and change your algorithm,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
than certain things. The bank doesn't wake up and change your checking account. It's usually still there, but they don't care about you. They care about your eyeballs and keeping you on the platform. That's why
It's a
like
basic goal misalignment.
100%, you're 100%. But also like, I see it like this, like, these platforms are like a really good bar or club or restaurant or dance club or whatever, right? It's cool because you can go there and it's free to use. They're free to be there. But if you go there and you've got, say, John's got really good dance moves and he's impressing everybody or whatever, and then you meet someone there and you connect and you're like, wow, you're a really good dancer, and you talk to her and she might be your soulmate, she might become your wife. What do you do at the end of the night? Do you just walk away and say like, I hope I randomly run into you at this bar
Yeah.
someday in the future? No, you're like, can I have your number? That's what you should do on
Do you give her
social.
a thumbs up?
Give her a thumbs up.
Yeah. Give her.
Like that's what you should do on
Okay.
social is allow them to
Yeah.
have a connection with you outside of social. So social media is great for dance clubs. Go there, do your dance moves. And then if you're there, give them an opportunity to go deeper, whether that's your website, your email list, your SMS. But like, I always treat this stuff like it's great. It's cool that the club is free. And also I treat it like it might go away tomorrow completely.
Yeah.
So be inviting them into your home.
Yeah. And I like to have conversations with people right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
just 5-10 people a day minimum. I'll have a
Yeah.
conversation with people right there. Or sometimes just like click call, like literally there. If I'm talking to somebody and we're
Sure.
messaging back and back, I'll just hit call. Just
Yeah.
like, yo, what's up? My fingers are tired.
I love these platforms. Like the perfect intro speech was mostly built by giving a bad version of the speech, and then smart people would raise their hand and ask questions afterwards. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. And then the next time
Yeah.
I give the talk, I addressed it. You can do that on Twitter Spaces with one click. You can go live on Twitter, and you and I could be having this conversation on a Twitter Space, and like 70 people are listening live, and then they get the recording and the transcript. It's Twitter Spaces is a podcast with one button, go live right now, boom, and then it'll invite your people. It's hard, as you know, it's hard to pull off a live podcast like listeners and live and everything else. They tend to be async. So the platforms are beautiful. Use them. Just don't count on them, and don't make them your one thing if it gets taken away.
Well, I love testing things in real time. I mean, why do you think I'm doing this summit?
Yeah, it's great.
Raise a ton of money for charity, branding the obvious choice idea and philosophy. You know, all the speakers I brought in very tightly align with at least one of the lessons. There's 13 lessons in the book. But also, yo, I'm loading. Like I took down some notes from you that's going to improve one of the sections.
Sure.
And I might reach back to you about that. But I was smiling so hard when you were talking about the perfect calendar, because you and I have never spoken about this, and I've never heard anybody else who does this. I have been doing that twice a year for the last decade.
Really?
Every time that we go away for the winter. So this will be our 12th winter in a row away. Right? We take 4 to 6 months apart every single year. And every time I go away, so I call it the 8-4 because we generally go away like 4 to 6 months. And every time that I go away, I wipe my calendar clean and I start over. And then every time I come back to Toronto, I wipe my calendar clean and start over. And I do it based off of the big rock. Like I just basically build priorities of, I don't systematize it the way that you do. And I'm curious to learn more about how you identify and prioritize tasks, because I don't really have a good system for it. It's more just like you, I realize that you just acquire shit. You just say yes to things unconsciously, and I don't, at least when I say yes to doing something or add something to my calendar, I don't look at it and say, what is this going to replace? I just take on more and more and more and more and more. So this allows me to remove myself from it and look at everything again from first principles and start again. But I'd love to hear more about, because you've thought about this, for other people, as opposed to me. It's like, hey, here's this weird thing that I do. I'd love to know more about how you
No,
help
that's
people kind of prioritize those things very selfishly for myself.
yeah, for sure. And I'm always happy to sit and go through the long version with you. It's basically a bunch of I'm fortunate. I don't really have imposter syndrome, but sometimes I have sort of like a simplicity syndrome because I'll think about something and work on it and dip the candle in the wax. And then, 4 or 5 years later, it's fully built out. But because I've been looking at it every day, it doesn't feel very complex because it just moved 1% every day. And I'm like,
Yep.
people know this stuff, right? About their calendar. Or they wipe their calendar clean. You're the only person I've ever met who actually does it. So it's nice. It's a permission slip to do that. And then I just ask them a series of very simple questions. And it goes something like this. I'm like, what was your favorite moment or day of work last year? When you were working, was it giving a keynote speech and getting a standing ovation? Was it, when you came up with that really interesting insight and brought it to your boss and then the project happened? Was it
Yeah.
at work, but it was not to do with work? You had a really deep conversation with somebody who was struggling with something and you were played therapist that day, best friend or whatever. And people, they're good. They like pause and they really think. And usually they come up with it, but then maybe half the time they're a little bit surprised by it. They're like, oh yeah, it was that thing. And then I'm like, what was your worst moment or day of work?
They
What
were
was your,
surprised at what they, in retrospect, what they remember really enjoying.
yeah. Well, because it takes them a second to remember and think and all this stuff. And I'll give them, if they're stuck, I'll give them a couple more prompts. And then what was your best? What was your worst? And really why and how did it make you feel, right? I'm not a therapist, but if we do more of the stuff that makes us happy and less of the stuff that we hate, guess
Yeah.
what? Like serotonin, dopamine, I mean, all the stuff that happens. And it can go in a work setting. You can go to your boss and be like, hey, often your boss just doesn't know. I remember at Accenture. So I had discovered Seth Godin's work 2003. And I tried to bring that kind of thinking to Accenture for a few years and it wasn't really working. And then I was getting really frustrated. I was client facing. I was at a big project in Boston for a couple of years and I was doing a good job. Like I was sort of the interface that could talk to the client, understand what they want, and then
Yeah.
explain it to our like technical developers. I was like the intermediary between don't let the developers talk to the clients. I'll do that and tell them
Oh,
both
yeah.
sides.
I know. I love
And
talking to
so,
software people. They're like, no. You need somebody with interpersonal skills. No, not that guy.
yes, exactly. And so, and after that project, I went to my boss and I was already kind of wound up at this point. It was sort of my Jerry Maguire moment with the goldfish. And I was like, Chris, he was a good friend. I was like, Chris, I'm never doing that again. And he looks at me like Yoda and he's like, I know. And I was like, I've got other skills. And he's like, he interrupts me. He's like, I know. And then I was like, when were you going to tell me? And he goes, when were you going to tell me? And basically saying like,
Yeah.
we're going to use you the way that the firm, the overall Borg needs to use you until you raise your hand and step up. And then he worked with the partners and created this role for me and allowed me to go do this thing. So like for anyone who's out there listening, whether you're doing your own thing or, you're working for somebody else, especially if you're working for a different organization, raise your hand and like nobody, like we've heard the phrase, nobody's coming to save you and nobody's going to like bequeath you with this award or this sword or this thing or this quest. You have to decide to do it. So to your point about your great point earlier about working backwards, perfect calendar and champagne moment, just combine those and just sit with whoever it is. If you're by yourself, just if you're, solo or single, just do it by yourself. If you're with your partner, I highly suggest you do this exercise with them because if your perfect calendar is 4 months in Europe and their perfect calendar is not 4 months in Europe, you should probably have that conversation. But just get it out. Go to, this is like a $20 solution. Go to Staples or online on Amazon and just order the biggest, emptiest calendar for next year or
Yeah.
whatever, and just sit with them and do it. And if something's like, man, we both hate doing that, cool, put it on like a to hire list or to outsource or to chat GPT or whatever. I promise you, more than unleash the power within, more than learning cold email sales or anything you'd call sort of business or personal development, if you wake up every day and look at your calendar and you're like, hell yeah, like
Yeah.
I challenge you not to be pretty happy if that's the case. And it sounds like you've been doing this for years, so that's awesome.
Well, and the interesting thing that happened with me over time is that more and more space opened up. I just did less and less and less and less to the
That's
point where my Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays are completely open to read and write.
Nice.
No calls, nothing booked, nothing. Like
That's
nothing.
great.
Like you look at my calendar, I have 2 podcast bookings. If I need to book any calls or podcasts or guest appearances or whatever beforehand, then they only get booked in the hour before the 2 podcasts with a 15-minute break. And that's it for the week.
That's
Now, the
awesome.
summit is different because the summit, I've
Yeah, sure.
recorded 27 of these.
Well,
But
that's like eating really well all week and then allowing yourself to have, a piece of cake or whatever because you did job and you hit the gym and everything else. Like you stack it and you're consistent most of the time, and that allows you to. I mean, this is still a great thing to put on there.
and you get re-energized. Like I've been doing this now for about a month and a half, and you're one of the final people that I'm recording for the summit. And God, man, I'm happy that I'm doing this, but I cannot wait to get back to that just deep focus time. But if you're in deep focus time all the time, it just becomes time.
Sure.
And so it is nice to have a change. There's a process that I came across that I don't know if you're familiar with. It was from Jim Collins. It's called The Bug Book. You ever heard about this one?
No, I don't know this one.
I don't remember where I heard it. It's definitely from Jim Collins, Good to Great, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's this idea, but it's the first time that I'd ever heard like a real usable process. And I've done it multiple times myself, and it was really useful, of figuring out what energizes you and what doesn't energize you. And the idea is you study yourself as if you would study a bug, as if you're a scientist studying a bug. So you're the bug. And what you do is you carry around a little notebook or something with you, piece of paper, it doesn't really matter. And you give yourself a score in 0.5 increments from -2 to +2, 8 times a day.
Okay.
And you just have an alarm that goes off, right? And you, I mean, I do this for 3 or 4 days at a time every few months just to kind of reset myself. So you don't have to do it forever.
Yeah.
But what happens is the alarm goes off, right? Whatever, phone alarm, watch, whatever you use, and you give yourself a score, completely objective. Like how do I feel right now? +2 is incredible. I'm energized. I'm raring to go. -2 is like, brain fog. Like I'm doing this shit I don't want to do. I'm with this person I don't want to be with. So you give yourself a score, -2 to +2, 0.5 increments. And then you write down really quick any details. What am I doing? Who am I with? Right? Don't even think about it. And then at the end, you look at all of your -1s to -2s, and you look at all your +1s to +2s, and you will immediately see patterns.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a really fascinating way of being like, okay, well, like, I guess I don't like that person as much as I thought that I liked that person.
Sure.
Or, hey, this task in my work seems to really be wearing me down. I never thought about that before.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might see patterns that, even though you might log, like, I don't know, let's say that you kind of hate running or don't love it or whatever, you might notice on days that you run, even though you logged the running as a -1, that the rest of your day went better. And you just realize you got to do something, even if it's not running. You get outside before in the morning. There was a campaign that I helped on Kickstarter. A friend of mine, Chad Moretta, founded a very interesting company called Evo. And it was a planner and it was an app. It was basically an expansion of the idea you just talked about. But it was like a daily journal and planner and everything else. And you would log it, but then you would use your phone and a QR code to basically upload it to the cloud. And before you even got the planner, you took a deep kind of personality test, and you might be an alchemist and I might be an architect, and you get the planner that's made for you. And then you can log it and start to see patterns of like, if I get outside and see the sun before 9 a.m., I'm happier the rest of the day, or I'm more productive the rest of the day. So yeah, this stuff all matters. People, whatever it takes, whether it's perfect calendar or this exercise or whatever, like audit. Yeah. And you've been doing this for years, like audit your life and your happiness. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can use whatever system you want, but just pause and and you might have to, go with your partner to a cabin in the woods, or you might have to get a babysitter to do this exercise or whatever. But like you said, it's worth it. We plan everything else in our life. We plan dinner and we plan the movies, like plan your life.
I mean, nothing about this is new, is it? Know thyself.
No. Yeah,
That's the oldest advice in the world.
Totally.
But it's hard to know thyself when everybody's telling you what you should be or what you should be doing. Yeah. And there are different games that people play. And good advice for somebody else might not be good advice for you. And I even give advice to people that I don't follow myself. And that can be that can be jarring sometimes.
Sure.
But I think that if an expert in something gives advice that they don't themselves follow, that's perfectly reasonable in a lot of cases because they understand where that advice fits in,
Right.
and they understand themselves, and they understand that for the majority of people this might be good advice, and that's why you're giving it in a general sense.
Yeah.
But for me, based off of the game that I'm playing, this is not the right advice. And you only know that if you know. I just gave a presentation on wealth generation. It was
Sure.
a lot of that kind of theory. It was like, it's like, yo, I can afford not to get stinking rich, but I can't afford to get taken out of the game. So here's how I think about wealth.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. Tiger Woods can beat Tiger Woods' golf coach at golf, but he still has a golf coach, right? It's like you can
Still has
teach.
a golf coach.
Yeah, for sure.
He's had multiple golf coaches.
Yeah,
And
he's had a few.
here's an even better one. And he had a LASIK eye surgery so that he could see better and have better vision.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I did LASIK a long time ago. Man, like 2000, what was it? 2002, I did LASIK. I did a bunch of research, and even by 2002, the surgeon had done like 12,000 of them or something like that, or whatever. He's like, it's a drive-through, and it was great. I woke up the next day and I thought I left my contacts in because I could see. I rolled over and saw the alarm clock and I could see. But yeah, it was great.
That must have been the weirdest feeling ever.
It was very weird to be able to see the next day, for sure.
Wow. Well, Clay, this was a joy, man. So happy that we got to do this.
Yeah,
I took a lot of notes myself as we were talking,
Nice.
so I might follow up with you personally for the book on a few things.
For sure, we'll follow up. We'll do the book, and yeah, we can chat book marketing and book launch and all that stuff too.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This was a joy. People really gonna love it. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.